Thank you for coming out. Today we've got 3 lightning talks, a little bit of a different format. Typically we do like one talk that's like 45 minutes or whatever, but there was a lot of cool discussion that we had at the last meetup about some interesting ideas that just kind of fire off 3 talks and keep it to however many minutes, but just kind of have a diverse kind of lineup of different talks, because there were some things brought up where filling it with 45 minutes might be a little too much. So I'm excited because one of them, I think if you've ever worked with Get, you love Get until you run into the dun-dun-dun merge conflict, right? So Devin here is going to be talking about resolving conflicts. I think that one in general I'm pretty excited for, because I have my own method in how I do that. I typically use the IDE, but I think seeing it from a more low-level standpoint is going to be very nice. So that's going to cover avoiding merge conflicts to begin with, and then also solving merge conflicts and just merging basics in general as far as Git, so GIT. And then we also have Aries, who's going to be talking about golden paths in software delivery. So he brought up this thing called Dora metrics, which I've never heard of, and when I went to go look at it, it's pretty interesting, right? It's basically for software delivery. It's a key strategy for streamlining your journey from source code to production, right? So in that, we're going to learn a little bit about full-end CI/CDs, continuous delivery, that sort of thing, kind of like what we talked about last month. And then I'll be covering just briefly my experience with a various amount of tools to code with AI, right? AI is a hot topic nowadays, and I've used a few tools, but I wanted to start exploring some of the more aggressive tools out there, such as GPT Engineer and things like that. So I'll briefly kind of go into that. That could be kind of a whole talk in itself. All of these really could, but we may have another follow-up on that eventually. I do want to make a couple of announcements. We do have a speaker coming in next month. That's going to be interesting. I'm still getting the details on the talk, but that we kind of have that lined up. But following in April, we still have a spot open. So we can kind of discuss here at the end if anybody has any burning desires or things they want to hear about. Either someone here can give the talk, or the person raising their hand gets voluntold to do the talk that they're asking about. So I guess without further ado, let's have Devin come up and talk about Git.
At a previous meetup, one of the things that was brought up was merge conflicts. This is, I hope, a series of Git talks. This is the premiere of this Git talk. Never given it before. Haven't given a talk in a while. So I hope you enjoy it. Yeah, and this is as an icebreaker, this is the first talk I've ever given where there was a bed and a pinup girl on the wall. So this is definitely an unusual talk. But anyway, this talk, we'll see how useful it is. Some of it might seem like common sense. I want this to be kind of interactive, especially in the first 2 parts, because you may say I'm crazy, you may disagree with me. So yeah, and then the third part is more technical. You probably will already know how to do what I'm going to do, but maybe some questions will come up or whatever. I'm looking for feedback on whether this is helpful or not. Yeah, so I'm a senior software developer. I have been developing for almost 30 years. I am a Windows guy, .NET, Angular, DevOps. I grew up in Chicago, and I lived in Seattle, Phoenix, and now I live in Las Vegas. There's my contact information if you need it. As you can see, I don't have any background or anything for my slides. Nothing exciting. So, can you guys still hear me? Okay. First thing is the disclaimer. There is no magic bullet for solving merge conflicts. this talk discusses some techniques I've used in my career to prevent and solve merge conflicts. So I don't have a magic answer for you to say, here's how you solve a merge conflict, or here's a secret technique that we use to solve merge conflicts. So I hope these things I'm going to tell you are helpful to you. And again, stop me anytime if you have questions or whatever, or you disagree with me, or you want to talk about something. Okay, the assumption is that people do have some experience with GitHub and DevOps in general. We're going to assume, especially for the technical part, that the development is occurring on a feature branch. Main branch is used for deployments and builds. And we're going to assume that we won't really need this, but assume that the main develop branches are protected and require pull requests to update. For this particular talk, we're not going to have to worry about that much. And then we're going to assume that there's a central Git repository hosted in the cloud. We may refer to it as the server. I don't know if you guys know that with Git, all repositories are basically the same. But we're going to call the one on the server if we need to. And in this case, for the demo, we'll be using GitHub as our central repository. Okay, this talk is going to be in 3 parts. First is avoiding merge conflicts. The best way to avoid a merge conflict is prevent them and minimize them in the first place. Therefore, we're going to talk about some of the techniques I've used to avoid merge conflicts. And a lot of this is common sense, but maybe a reminder will help, or help you in your day-to-day stuff. Then we're going to talk about solving merge conflicts, some techniques I've also used once you know you have a merge conflict. And finally, we're going to do, if we have time, merging basics. And that's something most of you probably already know how to do this, but I figured we'd fill up the remaining time with that. Josh, can you let me know how we do on time? I have never given this talk before, so I don't know if it's going to take forever or if it's going to be quick. I don't know. So, okay. And as you can see, I learned how to use PowerPoint and how to bring things onto the screen. Okay, so this is going to be basically a series of bullet points that we'll talk about. Again, if you have experience or you want to talk about a particular thing quickly, just raise your hand and tell me. So the first thing is that small merges are usually easier than large merges. Therefore, you should merge as often as possible, and that includes in both directions. When you're working on a feature for a while, you want to try to keep up with the main branch as much as possible, so that we don't. The person who gave the talk before us had a problem where she spent a month disconnected from the main server and found out she had lost a bunch of work. So, if possible, don't wait till the end of feature development cycle to merge the main branch. Anyway, okay. Then the second point is, when you create a feature branch, remember to always pull the latest code from main before you create the new branch. I've actually done this many times before, where I had an out-of-date main branch and I create a feature branch from it, only to not realize that my main branch was out of date, and I should have pulled the latest code in main first before I created my feature branch. Then the next thing is, if you can on your team, it depends on the size of your team, but if you have multiple developers working on the same code area, try to arrange schedules so the same code is not updated by multiple developers at a time. Merge conflicts come when multiple people try to update the same code at the same time. So I've done this before, where I arranged it so that someone was working on one topic or one part, and then another person later was working on it later in the sprint, or possibly in the next sprint, or whatever. That could be helpful as well. And then, of course, a really important thing is to talk to the other developers about the code changes that you're making. A lot of times I've been through this, where during the same project you're updating code, and 2 people need to make the same basic code changes. And they might make them a little bit differently depending on their experience. So if you talk about the changes beforehand, you might be able to synchronize your changes and avoid conflicts. You can use draft, it doesn't say it here, but you can also use draft PRs to, I might have said it later in the talk, but draft PRs are a great way to share code. You can make a pull request early, in the early part of your development, before you're even ready to merge, and then people can review it and look at it and contribute to it beforehand. Okay, oh, that's the next one. Other thing, use draft pull requests to make other developers aware of changes before they're be ready to merge. This could help preventing incompatible changes during a merge, because some merging is very easy, but there are times when you have completely incompatible changes, and that's when you have a problem, and that's when you have to spend a lot of time merging. All right, part 2. Yes, go ahead.
What's a draft PR?
Oh, I'm sorry. Different organizations do it differently, but you just usually put the label draft on it so that people know that it's not ready to be merged. Because I've been in organizations where you submit a pull request and say, oh, well, pull request, great. Here it goes.
It's a PR, and it does the merge conflict analysis in
Yeah.
the PR, but the expectation is don't merge this.
Not at this time. Eventually it might be mergeable, and it might not, but
Yeah.
I think something like GitLab is actually a checkbox, and it will not allow you to.
okay, yeah,
It will actually not allow you to. You don't have the merge button. Okay.
that's even better, right?
Until the checkbox is actually resolved. Yeah, it's
You could also mark it waiting for author. There's a variety of ways to make sure that nobody.
working with algorithms on here.
Yeah.
But in GitLab, it's a checkbox.
Oh,
It just
okay.
simply will not allow the merge to be merged, but it will do all the other things.
Right. It kind of, I guess, it kind of depends on the technology you're using and your organization, right? Make sure your other developers know that, how to recognize a draft pull request so that your lead won't automatically merge. I've had that happen where I put in a draft pull request and it got merged, and I'm like, hey, and he said, oh, wait, you put in a pull request and it wasn't ready? I'm like, oh, okay. At any rate, okay, back to this. Style standards are important. Style changes can cause merge conflicts all the time. Things as simple as tabs and spaces, white space, all those kind of things can change as you're editing a file. And there's nothing worse than having a merge conflict caused by something stupid like white space or tabs or something ridiculous like that. So a good way to prevent that is to just use style standards and prevent those from the first place. Okay. Oops. I don't know why that went away, but anyway. So the next thing is review your changes before attempting to merge. And if you do find that you've accidentally reformatted some code, you made a change and then you found out later that it wasn't needed and you ended up splitting a line or something stupid like that, try to get rid of that because it's going to come up as a diff and it could potentially cause a merge conflict. And just in general, you should do that because when I'm looking at a pull request that I see ridiculous changes that don't mean anything, it just drives me crazy and wastes my time and their time. And then, of course, there's general code cleanup tasks that take place. Avoid doing this when there's feature development going on because it can tend to cause a lot of changes to a file, especially when code starts moving around and things of that nature. So if possible, try to schedule those tasks at times when that particular part of the code isn't being worked on. And then it goes without saying, try not to do those tasks in the midst of your feature development unless you're the only one working on it at the time. And then, like I said, be careful about moving existing code. If someone else is making changes to that code, you can easily have a miss during the merge because the code will look like it's gone, but the changes they made to it may not make it into the moved code. And that's probably a topic unto itself. And then, when deleting code, obviously make sure that the code you're deleting isn't needed by anybody else at that point. That's probably self-explanatory, but that's what I could think of as far as avoiding merge conflicts. Does anyone have anything to add that they could think of? Yes, go ahead.
So I have a question organization-wise. How large do you make your commits, and how do you make them meaningful so that someone going through your code can easily determine what you're doing?
It's It's a good question. The question is, how large should the commit be, basically? It depends. It depends. There's no black and white answer on that, I would say. I would say that you should probably try to split your tasks in such a way that you could probably do a merge at least once a sprint, if not, or one at least. No, you wouldn't want a pull request to be bigger than one sprint worth of work, right? And if you are making a lot of changes, you might want to do them incrementally. It kind of depends on the organization too. Some organizations like big pull requests. Some say I want a very small pull request with just a few changes in it. Other organizations I've been in, people say, you're wasting, 20 pull requests, could have just done it in one. So, but yes, that is a good point. That is a good point of sizing your request. I might have that in solving merge conflicts. I don't remember. So, okay, moving right along. This is the part where we talk about solving merge conflicts. How are we doing on time there?
You're good. Yeah, still 15 minutes.
Oh, okay. Good. Okay, so then it took just about the right time. Okay. Remember that the goal when you're solving merge conflicts is to get fully merged code with all the features working correctly in as short as time as possible. That's the goal. Remember, your stuff has to work and their stuff has to work. If you break their stuff, it's just as bad as your stuff not working. And we all know that when you have merge conflicts, you can break other people's stuff quite easily. Okay. First thing, and I'm not always good about this either, but before attempting to merge your code into the main branch, always keep your feature branch up to date with all the changes that are there. And make sure that your changes are working locally with those changes. Don't try to do everything all at once. In other words, don't hope that your code works with all the latest changes on the server. The way when this usually happens is when you've gotten your feature branch 2 weeks ago, and there's been a lot of changes on the server, and you haven't synced with it, and then you try to merge your code at the same time with other changes that are going on, and you end up having incompatible changes. So it's usually a lot easier to make sure that it's your code plus what the latest code plus your changes to be tested. That usually makes it a little bit easier. Then be sure to try to understand other developers' changes that have been made before you start the merge. If necessary, look at the code you're merging and review the code changed at each commit. If you try to merge without understanding changes on both sides, you're going to have problems. So if you have a merge conflict, the first most important thing is to understand why the other change was made. Because if you don't understand what the point of that change is, you're probably not going to end up merging it correctly. And you're going to break their stuff at that point. And then another thing is, when there's a very complex merge, and I've been through this, I've even had this problem with my own self when I'm working on 2 different branches at the same time. It's okay if the tool isn't working for you, don't use it. What I'm trying to say is it's okay to do a quote-unquote manual merge. The way I do this, I'll usually produce a better result, it allows you to commit and test in separate commits. The way I do this is make another copy of the repository and get the latest code into that repository, and then port your changes over, one by one to the other branch, and you can even do it in the same repository if you want, or the same thing with different branches. But it's usually easier to have 2 different repositories. That way, you could just cut and paste the code over. If it's going to be a really complex merge, and you're not sure how long it's going to take to do the merge, you may end up being a week later and you're still trying to get everything working correctly. So sometimes it's a lot easier just to start over with their stuff and then apply your stuff. Plus you could apply your changes one by one at that point and see if it's still working, etc. So that's my advice on complex merging. And yeah.
Is there a term for that that interaction right there where you go to do a merge, but then you're like, oh my gosh, there's other people that have been messing with this, and there's a whole shebang with it. I've always heard it being called massaging a merge.
Okay. I never heard that.
I don't know what else to categorize that as, but
I don't know either, but I I usually have 5 or 6 copies of any repository on my machine so that I can, compare and do comparisons and stuff across them with other tools and stuff. So that's my advice. And I start over a lot, basically, with not just on my stuff, but if a path isn't going well, I might just start over on another copy of the repository and go from there.
I have a statement.
Huh?
I have a statement. As a former Scrum Master that led quite a few teams, we highly encourage some of the young developers to commit every day before they walk out, right? Here's some of the use case where one did and the guy fired him. He took his brand new laptop home, did committed on Friday, called me on Sunday, said, yeah, he got caught in the rain, his brand new laptop full of water. The first question was, where's the code? Did you commit? He said, oh, I forgot. Fired on Monday. So sometimes it is highly necessary to highly encourage some of the young developers to commit every day or not every week.
Do you
lost code for DirecTV and AT&T. That was a bad day.
do you encourage them to commit and push?
Huh?
Commit and push?
Just to commit.
Locally, or do you commit?
Locally, to commit bucket actually.
Okay, that's like a push.
So, sorry, push.
Yeah. So it's probably a good thing. It depends.
I agree with
It kind of depends on your. The problem is that you can end up with a ton of commits in your main project history. A lot of companies like Microsoft, I'm working for contracted to Microsoft, and they actually squash all those commits into a single commit for the pull request, et cetera. So that's the negative of tons of commits, is you can lose track of what's actually changed because there's so many commits. But there are strategies to handle that problem as well. Of just because you make commits in your remote branch doesn't mean that they have to appear in the main branch later. So that would be a talk into itself of squashing commits and how to handle.
These guys weren't backing up anywhere like on their laptops at all. So that
Yeah.
didn't be a problem. I saw it.
Yeah, if you have a reliability issue, yeah, but I don't usually commit every day, but I probably should.
There's one more comment to your point. So, like you mentioned with your junior developers, so not only commit and push every day, but after you push, check the status of the build server. Because if they push on a Friday afternoon and walk out,
Might not have
and
worked.
the build breaks, and they're already like 5 years into it.
Well, I'm assuming it's a feature branch, right?
It's feature branch specific.
I'm assuming it's a feature branch, so they probably aren't going to be merging to main every day.
But still,
Yeah.
if they push on a Friday to a feature branch, and the build breaks, and by the time they get back to work on Monday, they're like, I don't even remember what the hell I was thinking. Like,
So wouldn't it be better to have like multiple repositories, kind of like a sandbox 1, sandbox 2, and then the deployment repository in order to commit every single day?
I've never seen it done that way. You could do it that way, but it would be pretty complex. And when you have complexity, I've never seen it done that way. Usually you have environments for different things, but not separate repositories. But it is an extremely flexible tool. It could certainly handle it. And some people do that by like having different levels of branches, right? You might not merge directly into main, which goes into production. You might merge into several levels deep, and then it has to be merged up the chain and reviewed by different people. So that's one approach. But Git is very flexible about branches. Are very easy to create and maintain, so you don't usually need to go to multiple repositories. Multiple branches will do pretty much whatever you need.
Isn't that the Git flow process?
Yeah.
Instead of going directly to master,
Yeah.
which everybody thinks you're supposed to do for continuous development and it breaks production, do a Git flow, go into a buffer, which is like a develop branch or a QA branch, and then
Actually, main is, in my opinion, main should be for what's in production today, and you should have a development branch that you merge into. But I've heard of organizations that have multiple develop branches, multiple levels. So it just depends on how complex you want to make it. Different organizations have different requirements for. I've also worked at organizations where you just check it in and you merge it to server, no pull requests, no nothing.
What's your experience with branches from branches? I was in an organization that allow that, and merges were a nightmare. Right now, we merge only from, we direct for development right now in a company I'm working with, and things work out fine. But when I was in another company in Las Vegas that allowed branching a branch, a feature branch, create a feature branch from a feature branch.
Are you talking about Git?
Go back into develop was
Are we referring to Git? Using Git we're talking about?
using it.
Well, a branch is really nothing but a pointer to a commit. So if you manage your branches correctly, then you shouldn't have any problem. If you should merge from the branch that you should merge. If you created feature 2 from feature 1, you should merge back to feature 1 before made. If you try to jump over a branch, yeah, you could have some problems.
Yeah, I've seen it where like there's an epic.
Yeah.
Usually developers that are working on related code, but you don't want to you kick off a epic type branch and then they can all merge into that work together, and that's cool. Put that in the development.
Because remember, like I said, Git branches are nothing but a pointer to a commit. So your commit history is what gets merged together. So if you create a branch from main and a branch from feature 1, if they're both pointing the same commit, your new branch is the same. It doesn't make any difference. So, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I figured this was probably
Good stuff.
was going to go to.
Merge, come on, just put it.
Well, the last part is probably something most people know how to do anyway. So I just added that as a filler material. So if you use a merge tool, consider configuring Git to use the merge tool. My basic point of this is I like to use UI for merges. I find the command line merge to be a little wanting and a little. So unless you're working in a headless Unix environment or something where you don't have a UI to use, I would recommend always using a UI to merge. I think that Joshua was saying that too, that he uses a UI to merge as well. So that's my opinion as well. That's what I said. So always try to use a GUI for merging if you can. Command line merging is not trivial. And of course, just as a general thing, it has nothing to do with conflicts, but do not introduce new changes during a merge because they get lost in the merge commit at that point. And then remember that you can always, in Git, you can always revert a failed merge. So if you're in the middle of merging and it's not going well and you're not sure quite what you're going to end up with, just abort the merge and start over at that point. It should be, as long as your repository is clean before you started, it should return back to the state when the merge started. So yeah. Okay. Okay, this is some merging basic stuff summary. So if possible, when you're merging, always start, I guess this is a kind of the third part of this second part. If possible, always start with a clean working directory and index, no committed, uncommitted changes, because then you can't get back to zero. If you do have uncommitted changes, which happens a lot, you may want to merge with the main branch and you still have, you can put your changes into a stash and then merge from a stash. And one of the demos I have is how to do that actually. It's not very difficult, but I don't think we'll get to it. And then when you are doing the merge, remember sometimes the tool refers to it as incoming. That's the source branch, and then current or head is the target branch. I always can never remember what incoming and current means, so put a little sticky on your desk or something to remember that. And this is actually the part where, if we wanted to, we could actually look at the demo of actually doing a merge. How much time we got, Joshua? Okay, I think we're out of time. So it takes time to actually do it, but I have the repository and all that set up, but I don't think we're gonna be able to do it in 2 minutes. So. Does anybody not know, would like to see?
Can you show the UI?
Sure. That's video poker. Fake video poker, actually, but all right, let's look at, where are you, VS Code? I'm drawing a blank now. That is how to set up for this demo. Oops. Folder. Document. I use VS Code. I don't know if you guys like VS Code or not, but it's my favorite merger. This is a scenario where I have 3 files. Can you guys, you can see it up there, right? You have conflict 1, conflict 2, and no conflict. One thing I love about VS Code is it lets you work with the command line if you want. So if you want to do a merge, and I already set up a feature 1 branch. Git merge feature 1. Okay.
Connected to a cloud service like Azure?
It is connected to GitHub, yes, but we won't need it in this case. So here's what happens. You get basically conflict files. And this is similar to a command line merge. Now you can use the merge editor if you want. This is like a 3-way merge tool, but in this case, these are really simple merges. So in some ways, this is like a command line merge. So you basically, what's happened is that in this conflict file, the code from main, which is head, is code for main 2, and our changes are from the feature branch are code for feature branch 1. So you just basically got to pick which one you want. Obviously, in a real-world merge, it's going to be a lot more complicated than that. But the way you do a merge in Git is you pick whatever you want, and you remove the conflict markers. Oops. Oops. There we go. Then you save the file. And then you, let's see, then under source control. So, by the way, the source control one shows you conflict1.txt, and so you would, let's see, then
Does it show all merges that need to be done?
Yes, correct. So it shows you all the files that have problems.
That red exclamation point there is telling you there's a conflict at the very right. Okay.
Yeah, and so basically the steps are you fix the files and then you stage them, and I just staged this one and you can see it's good. So another thing you can do is at this point you can test your code as well to make sure that it's correct. And then we fix this one too. We can do this, we could also do this in the 3-way merge editor. I don't use this all that often. So let's see, you can accept this side and then complete the merge, and some people like that better. Oh, and I picked the other one, so it ended up being no changes at that point. I picked the wrong one, basically. So at any rate, you would stage your changes. To finish a merge, you stage your changes, and then you commit them, basically. And it may tell me that it needs a message. No, I guess it didn't. Okay. And it's kind of a weird thing because the merge already has a message, but some editors force you to do a message, so it's a little tricky. And then finally, you can do it. One nice thing about VS Code is you can do it in, I already did it. So you can do things either whichever way is easiest. And for me, I like to use the UI for some stuff and the command line for other stuff. I'm not going to push this because that's going to mess up my repository on the server. So yeah, that's the actual steps for doing. And doing it from a stash is kind of the same thing, but you have your stash code down here, and it's a different repo. But when you pop the stash, it will do a merge at that point. And you do this basically the same thing. You resolve your merge conflicts, but at the end, you don't push it to the server because that was the whole point. Is those were your uncommitted changes, and they're still uncommitted at that point. So, and sometimes in that scenario, you have to unstage things because Git will sometimes stage things for you during a merge. So,
Sweet. I think we're out of time. But yeah.
Does anybody have any? Just quick thing.
Yeah.
If you have any ideas about another Git merge talk, Git's a huge subject. We could talk about a million different things with Git. So.
Yeah. At the end, let's gather some ideas, and maybe this evolves into a full-fledged talk too.
It could.
Yeah. Obviously, we ran out of time, but thank you very much, Devin.
Okay.
If you want the slides or to get in contact with Devin, I'll put his contact information on the meetup. Is that okay?
I'm
Like
sorry,
an
too.
email?
Yeah, definitely.
Your
The,
email
the
or
slides
something.
are in my GitHub repository as a PDF.
Just send me a link to it,
I will.
and I'll post it on there.
Huh?
What's your name on the
Devin5885.
All right, next we'll have Aries go up.
But yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I'm a recent Vegas transplant. I'm originally from Toronto, Canada, so I'm your northern Canadian neighbor here in Vegas on a TN visa, so really happy to be here. This is a talk I've given a few times in a few different incantations, but I'll briefly just kind of talk about myself. I can kind of get started, right? Yeah, cool. I'm basically a consultant. I work for a company called Ellingson. We're a cloud native consulting firm. I've been employed with them for about 5 years now. In the past, I've worked at a bunch of different startups, mostly in the private cloud space. I've got a lot of experience with OpenStack. Prior to that, I was at Dell, deploying servers, networking, storage into data centers across Canada. And then prior to that, I worked at VMware. So I've been really blessed to have a really fun career. And for, like I said, the last 5 years I've been at Allion, working with a lot of big companies doing what I would consider digital transformation is a really cheesy term, gets thrown around a lot, but in the context of cloud computing, app modernizations, migrations, big data projects, that's kind of where my bread and butter is. The focus for today's talk is on talking about what we consider a golden path and how we measure what we call a golden path. And specifically, this golden path is basically the process of getting your software into production for your company. So this obviously matters because companies are trying to do this as quickly as possible to compete with their own competitors. But there's also more reasons for it. Like you are going to be able to retain your talent better if you can show your developers, hey, what you work on today, you can push. You can see the results of it within 15 minutes versus 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, right? There's this virtuous cycle that happens when you're able to deploy faster and more efficiently. So this kind of brings us into the concept of continuous delivery. And Josh at last month's presentation did a really good primer into, I believe you did Azure DevOps and GitHub Actions. Are those the two tools?
GitLab and GitHub.
Yeah, GitLab and GitHub. And we went through two CI/CD examples. We're not going to get into, this isn't really a technical talk, it's more high level, but the concept of continuous delivery, if I could kind of dovetail off of your talk, is basically you always being able to deploy, release, develop, build, test. It's continuing the cycle. And you've heard of CI. CI just refers to continuous integration, process of building and testing the code artifacts. Process of delivery is literally just getting that code artifact out there to your customers. And another thing I want to highlight here is you want to be able to automate as much of this as possible. You want to reduce the cognitive overhead your developers are dealing with so they can focus on solving business problems, not dealing with infrastructure related to delivering the software itself. So this brings me into Dora. So one thing I always find is engineers, extremely talented people, love to think about things from a technological perspective, fail to make that gap to convince their bosses how to make the right technology investments for the business when they know deep down this is the right thing to do. So I always like to point at Dora. These are the 4 Dora metrics. And if you're curious, you want to learn more about them, you can go to dora.dev. Dora stands for DevOps Operational Research and Assessment. It's basically a think tank that's constantly producing academic research around DevOps, systems automation, how to be a better engineer. They publish a State of the DevOps report every year, completely free. Highly recommend you check them out. Google bought them 5 years ago, which I'm not a big fan of, but whatever, that's Google. It's still very academic in nature. They don't make technology recommendations. But you can see within these 4 metrics, and I'll just go through them quickly. We have the deployment frequency. How often are you able to deploy to your end users? Lead time for changes. For the changes that you're making, how long does it take to go from the code that you commit into production? Time to restore service. So when a service goes down and it's unplanned, or otherwise, how long does it take you to fix it and change failure rate? So if
what's the percentage of changes you're making to your app which results in it breaking. And you can kind of see these four columns, right? Last talk, there was some jokes, and this is a common joke in IT. It's like, don't deploy on a Friday, right? I mean, hands up, who likes to deploy on a Friday? Okay. Okay. Well, I'm here to tell you, up until this point, those who are afraid to deploy on a Friday fall within these sort of categories, right? And again, it's easy for me to stand up here, not know anything about your business and your workflow, and be like, you're a poor performer. But wouldn't you like to live in a world where you can deliver on a Friday? Hands up if you would. Obviously, okay, so this resonates with 3 of you, great. No, but basically, when you're looking at these elite performers, I know this is highly ideological, but it's really not. And I'm going to show you why, because these companies are doing it right now. Okay, so this type of evangelism around Dora and getting yourself to be an elite performer is not a matter of, oh, does the technology exist for it? Because it does. It's a matter of, is your organization willing to invest in it? Because you can imagine it takes a significant investment to look at the entire tool chain. And I'm kind of just getting ahead of myself here. Okay, sorry. So this is me giving a presentation unorganized. This is a tweet which kind of encapsulates what a lot of DevOps engineers like to do, right? Never spend 6 minutes doing something by hand when you can spend 6 hours failing to automate it. And in the context of automation, the primordial unit for an automation is the pipeline. So when you're looking at DevOps teams, like I always like to joke, what's a DevOps engineer? It's a YAML engineer. It's just someone who sits there and writes declarative configuration files all day. But really what these declarative configuration files are doing are creating stateless workflows, which are encapsulated as pipelines, right? And I don't care what tool you're using. You're either using GitHub Actions, Azure DevOps, GitLab, whatever the case may be. The point is or Jenkins, you have an automated process where something happens the time you check in code, that PR gets filed, that results in some sort of sanity check where a human being goes, okay, based on the automation we built, I'm confident enough to either take it from here, do some more manual verification before I push to prod, or the whole tool chain took care of it all for me. Did the testing, did the smoke tests, did the security tests, everything, it's good to go. I'm happy to deploy. And that's where, we should be. That's where I'm encouraging you and everybody else who deploy software to try to get yourself to that point. So again, it's not a technology problem. The technology exists to solve this. It's an organizational problem. It's, are you willing to make that investment? And again, why is this important? Us as engineers, we have our own opinions. We have our own ideologies. But most importantly, we want to reduce our cognitive overhead, right? If I don't want my engineers to have to focus on drudgery, on having to deal with the ins and outs of infrastructure, that doesn't really benefit me or them or the business, really, right? You can encapsulate that into something which is already taken care of in the process of infrastructure as code, in the process of an automated pipeline, in the process of a testing pipeline, and just have that go off and do its thing. Have individuals who are maybe focused on establishing a platform, and then have individuals who are focused on building the app. Don't make them do the same thing, because they're going to do both things in a crappy way. Have them focus on one thing at a time. And this brings us to this concept of the golden path. And the golden path literally is that. And the reality is that you have a golden path in your organization right now. Like, hands up, who is working for a company in their capacity, they're pushing code from source, or they're creating something, committing it to source, like GitHub, and then that makes its way to prod. Oh, okay. So there's already a golden path. Who raised their hand who'd be willing to maybe talk about the process inside their company, just briefly? Yeah, Josh, go ahead.
So, for example, Azure DevOps would be an example I could give, where we're pushing code, creating PR, it's reviewed, it's merged. There is a branching strategy that we have for the lower environment, and then a main branch that once QA tests RC or staging or whatever, then there's a manual push. So after the PR is merged, it's automatically pushed to staging. But there is a manual deployment process for actually doing the production deployment. And there are various pipelines, such as the infrastructure. Terraform is one. The actual deployment of the Lambda, for example, is kind of a separate one. Front end, back end is separated out. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Sounds like you have a pretty good automation, a lot of automation in place. When it works. Maintaining the automation is another software artifact of its own, right? That's where, like I said, having a platform team. Again, this is all idealistic. Realistically, to a small team, one person might be playing multiple roles. But having a separation of roles, it's like, hey, your job is to just make sure this all works. Your job is to like write the code, make sure the app works as expected, do the front end stuff, whatever. But yeah, thank you for sharing. Anyone else want to share their golden path as it exists? Did you have your hand up back there? Can I pick on you? Okay, he doesn't want to share. All right, fair enough. All right, fair enough. Cool. Moving on. So here's an example of a golden path I wanted to just point out. So for anyone who's involved in commercial software engineering, a lot of this shouldn't come as a surprise. You go from your local dev environment to committing code, and this goes into your Git server. Maybe you have some pre-commit hooks, or you put some specific context into that PR. Then you get into your pipeline, and typically these are written as code. You might be doing some caching. This is something we also covered in last month's talk. Then we get into our CI. This is where we do our unit tests. We do some code quality analysis. We build our artifacts. And then we get into actually building said release, where we actually package said artifacts. In this case, it could be an NPM thing. We'd be doing some container security scanning, maybe some automatic versioning, more code analysis. This is when we get into the sonar queues. Maybe we do some bug detection, maybe more security scans, to taking the release artifact itself all the way into the deployment. And this is where we can get into different deployment strategies, different deployment tools, ensuring that there's smoke tests in place, and the concept of environments, being able to promote between them, like dev stage prod. Having an automated rollback in place. So in the context of change management and change control, this is extremely critical because, as much as you can plan, things do go sideways, and having a plan to get back to the state that it was previously is critical. And then finally, make our way into prod. Any questions about any of this so far? No? Good? It's all straightforward? Now, everybody's doing this. Yeah, go ahead.
Does Dora, or because there's a lot that goes on here, right?
Yep.
And there's a lot of different tools for each one of these.
Yep.
Is there somewhere that it lists out, for example, license compliance? How could I find the top tools out there for doing that?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a great question. So Josh is basically asking, based on this golden path and these examples, how do I find specific tools or recommendations to pick them up? And if I haven't done this before, to start working with it. Does Dora even make that recommendation? Dora does not. Remember, Dora is strictly academic in nature. They'll never say use Google Cloud Build. It's the best. No, they'll never say that. But they'll say you need some sort of automated workflow engine, right? When it comes to these specific tools, remember, these are just examples. I could recommend something, but definitely just go to Google, see what's out there, ask online user communities, Twitter, Reddit. Maybe people here have recommendations as well as to what they use. Just curious here, out of this group of people, who's doing all of these things right now? Yes?
I think with Bamboo, we're doing all that with Bamboo.
Oh, using Bamboo, okay. Bamboo, is Bamboo a full-featured?
Yeah, full features.
Okay.
Bitbucket ties into
Oh, that's
all
right.
that crap.
Okay, so that's the full Atlassian suite then.
Yeah.
Nice. Anyone else doing anything like this? If you want to share?
Personally or the company?
Just anything. It's a group. I want us to kind of learn from each other a little bit.
GitLab, we're doing it GitLab too.
GitLab is also. Who uses GitLab right now? And do you use GitLab for things beyond just GitHub, the Git? Do you use it for the deployment and analysis, any of that stuff? Do you use the container registry feature? Okay, great. So that's good. I'm happy to hear
That's
that.
nice. And old school used to be Jenkins and then kind of custom hodgepodge together, which is.
I wish Jenkins would die. I'm just going to say that. I just wish it would die. Okay, but it works. It's easy. I don't have any, personally, I don't have affinity for specific tools.
That's a good interview question. Are you guys using Jenkins? I feel like
Yeah, fair enough. But there's a reason why Jenkins is still around. Like it just works. So people use it and it's free. So why not? But definitely, there's a lot of modern options out there. Any other questions, comments for anyone?
ADO is also, Azure DevOps is also full feature.
Azure
You can do
DevOps
all
definitely,
that.
yep, has all of this in it.
So one thing I just don't understand is blue-green. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, blue-green, great question. Blue-green is a deployment strategy. Blue-green basically says, okay, so it's kind of like, almost like A/B type deployment. So you could say your blue environment is the existing prod environment, and you have a green environment, which is the exact same, except it has one additional feature, or the feature, or a set of features that you want to merge. So what you can do is you can actually have two environments running in parallel, and you could either drain traffic from the blue environment into the green environment, or you could, I might be butchering this, or you could have a subset of the users go to that green environment, although I think what I just described is canary testing. But effectively, it's a type of deployment that ensures for availability, so your users aren't getting interrupted at the time you're doing the production deployment.
Like a double buffer.
Correct, yeah. If you didn't have a deployment strategy, what would happen when you upgrade your prod? You'd recreate. That's the default deployment strategy. And when you recreate your environment, that's fine if you don't have an SLA on your users and them being connected to your service. Like if you're running WhatsApp, recreate is not if you can't. That's like, imagine how pissed off your users would be if they just drop their calls every time WhatsApp's pushing an update, right? That would be a no-go. So WhatsApp likely is using either a blue-green or a canary type deployment when they're pushing upgrades to their service. So that way, like, okay, so any users who are having a call, they're in the blue environment, leave them alone. But any users who are starting a new call, put them in the green environment. And eventually, once all the users are done their calls, everything will flip over to the green environment. We can decommission the blue environment, that new green environment becomes a blue environment. And so on goes this deployment strategy. Yeah. Any other questions, comments? Any tidbits people want to share about how? Yep, go ahead.
Is this like the DevOps tech tree? Is that what I'm seeing?
No, this is, that's, the DevOps tech tree could be a talk of its own, honestly. I would say I really did try to just focus on the golden path and what that is and what the components of a golden path are, like in the specific engineering components, right? Because a lot of people, when they look at this, they go, hey, I got like all of this except for this, Because like, to Josh's point, when we're doing our deployment, I got to do it myself. It's a manual process. Josh, would you like to automate things at some point in here?
Yeah, but with more bulletproof, right? Yeah.
Oops.
We got 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're almost done anyways. Okay, so if it was more bulletproof, absolutely. Yeah, like I said, the process of building this is a software engineering project of its own, which is why I keep going back to this. It's good to have a platform team, depending on the size and scale of your organization. In enterprises, especially regulated ones, this is table stakes. So if you're a bank, if you're a healthcare company, you're an insurance company, you're walking in there, you're a junior dev, and you're going, oh, I can't wait to commit my code, get into prod. It's not going to happen like that. You're going to have to go through all these steps, and you're going to have to learn about it, which is great, but it's good to have an idea or an expectation of this going in, because commercial software development has all of these components to it. Now, moving on, what does this mean to a developer? What do we talk about when we talk about reducing cognitive load? What does this mean? To a developer, this is all it means. Okay, my code works. I committed it. Can it be merged? Yes. Great. I'm done. It's a loaded statement. I see some skeptical looks on some of your faces.
Well, I failed the unit test, the 80% rule.
Yeah, that's true. But, I mean, actually, Devin, you just gave a great talk on merge conflicts. How does this resonate with you?
I think there's more to it than that.
Okay. And can you expand? What else would you add in here from a developer experience point of view?
Well, things that other people have said, like unit tests, code coverage.
So all of that would fail. If those things are failing, we're back to the commit code section. So the developer goes, oh, okay, the pipelines, this is the platform just told me my code's not ready. It failed one of these tests. So what do? Well, I got to go back and keep coding. Gotta
I've
keep,
seen a SonarQube vulnerabilities
Mhm.
pulled up a lot of deployments because one team is in India and they specify that this is a vulnerability and
Mhm.
no 18.2, and then I can go get a version that works with that.
there you go.
So why are you doing SonarQube so late? That's what I wonder is,
Well, SonarQube specifically, depending, it's probably either being used for code quality or code security, right?
Yeah.
So it's probably happening in here. I put in the code analysis section, but it can happen either in the
Yeah.
CI or these.
I like to have it happen before the pull request is even approved, really. I mean, ideally.
All of this should happen before a pull request. Like all of this up until here should happen before the PR gets approved. So does this make more sense now?
Oh, okay.
Because when we're looking at this is, I'm a dev. I just filed my PR. If it says it can't be merged, it's because I built a pipeline that tests up until here.
Okay.
Does this make sense? Anyone have questions about this? Am I saying ridiculous things up here? Because you
No.
can tell me. Okay. Because I get a lot of people like, I love the idea of this, but it's too crazy, man. You're drinking some crazy Kool-Aid. I'm telling you, this exists. And when I go back and I show these logos, I could easily put twice as more logos up here. I don't put Google, Amazon, and Microsoft because that's like too easy. But they were the first ones who really evangelized this style of engineering. And these guys picked it up, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. They had no choice. Because, for example, even Nordstrom, you wouldn't think of Nordstrom as a digital native software engineering company, but they're one of the most advanced digital retailers because of their commitment to ensuring their developers are happy and they're able to make multiple changes every day. Like companies like Netflix, they release, I think 250 plus changes every day. So this whole concept of deploying on a Friday, I know we're laughing, but it's not a joke there. They actually do deploy on a Friday all the fucking time. So just ask yourself what kind of engineering is going on. Capital One, who has seen Capital One at who's been to reInvent or Google Cloud Next? What's Capital One doing there? I always ask myself, are they giving out credit card applications? No. They're just there talking about how cool their technology is. Come work for us. That's their whole angle. They're like, come work for us. You will be a better engineer because we are a digital software company. We're not a bank, we're a software company at its core, right? Okay, I don't want to get too into my theoretical, hypothetical, metaphorical TED Talks. Okay, but this is effectively the context of cognitive load and what you want to have your engineers focus on. Did my code pass the PR, the tests? Can it be merged? Yes, great, it can go on in production. This is more of a practical example of a CI/CD pipeline where we're looking at, say, a Kubernetes cluster with GitOps at its core, where we got your app code here, you have your Terraform here, and you have maybe some metadata describing some communication between these guys. They go through the process of being built and deployed into a repo. And the Git server is able to sync with a GitOps tool. Who's familiar with the term GitOps? Show of hands, GitOps? Okay, GitOps, very quickly, is just the process of these declarative files just sit in a Git repo and describe the app itself. So the opposite of GitOps would be like ClickOps, just me imperatively doing things. GitOps is having those all in Git, like a file, like a Git repo, where changes to that result in actual changes being made to my production system. In this case, they're Kubernetes clusters. So more kind of takeaways. Infrastructure as code is your friend. Terraform, Helm, Packer, great tools to use if you've never used them before. Obviously, use Git. Keep your, have an idea of pick a good app artifact repository, whether you're using a cloud native one or you're using your own. And just make sure when you're looking at your golden path, any one-time scripts, environment variables, or pipeline configurations are declared somewhere. You would not be surprised how many times when they're building out that process of a golden path, they think they know it all, and then they realize, oh, you know what, that one person actually does that one thing, and they're out until next week, so we gotta wait for them. It's like, okay, well, that's fine. Write down that thing that they're responsible for, and put that into code, so we have it. You can move towards doing things automatically using GitOps. And Finally, I'm just gonna skip over this. This is from the State of DevOps report, I think from last year. Basically, DevOps practitioners are using more technologies now than before, and these are just some of the types of tools they're using. And there's actually a correlation between high-performing teams and the number of tools they use. So that means teams that use more tools are better at deploying their software. Who would have thought, right? That was a joke, but that's that. I mean, if anything, from one takeaway I want you guys to get from this is like when you're looking at your stack, and you're looking at things you'd like to start investing in, do it because it will likely result in your engineering practice being improved as a result of it. Anyways, thank you. Appreciate you guys. Yeah, I will put this somewhere. You can just email me directly, or just come up to me. I'll just email it to you. Yeah.
Don't have a camera phone.
I'm sorry?
Don't have a fear of it.
Don't have, yes, don't. Unless you ask my ex-girlfriend, yep.
Other than Dora, what are some practical approaches that a beginner like myself who knows nothing about DevOps can take?
Actually, I've shared this with you individually, which is the DevOps roadmap.
Okay.
So I think it was was it devops.sh?
Yeah.
You go there.
Yeah,
and they have a great list of technologies in a linear format. You can kind of follow and kind of get. DevOps is a bit of an advanced topic because I think it involves you having to understand not just programming, software engineering, but also systems administration, security, all these things. So it's not a beginner-friendly topic whatsoever. So it's very often, myself, I have a systems administration background. And then I later worked for software engineering companies, and then later found myself in the DevOps space. It kind of just happened. I didn't seek to enter the space. And that's a very similar thing. And when I talk to DevOps engineers, I used to be a programmer, and then I was interested in systems admin, and here I am maintaining the platform for my company. Yep.
So, to your point, if you're a beginner, one of the things that I often tell people is if you want to get into this kind of stuff, try to automate your own job first. Just automate your own job so that everything is a push button. Everything you do.
Okay, like my actual job?
Yeah. So
What-
just like you just write some code, push a button, and it does all the rest of whatever it is that you do.
Okay.
Just try to figure out some way to just automate your own job. That's what DevOps guys are.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
To automate everybody else's job.
Okay.
So speaking of automating jobs, I'm going to talk about real quick how to turn coders into computers. So basically, over the last couple of weeks, I've been tinkering around with some of the code AI tools out there. I will have to zip through this just because we're getting low on time here. But feel free to stop me, and we can try to quickly discuss. Obviously, after the meetup here too, I'm happy to talk about. We usually go over to Taverna and chit chat more in detail. So, thank you again, Aries. I appreciate it. We'll get your details up on the meetup as well, and I'll throw the slides, the PDF up there if anybody wants to take a look at that. So there's 3 tools I'm going to talk about. One I'm going to briefly talk about, and 2 of them I'm going to briefly talk about, and then we'll dive into the one that I kind of chose. So there is a tool called ChatGPT. Everybody's probably heard of it. It's like all the hot new rage, right? ChatGPT is pretty sweet. It basically allows you to ask it anything, and the AI computer wizard will give you an answer, right? Well, there's been a lot of advancement in it beyond just asking it what's the meaning of life. You can now get it to actually do work and stuff like that, right? So originally, I signed up for something called GitHub Copilot. Copilot is basically a tool that will integrate into your IDE and gives you helpful tips along the way. If you want it to generate code and stuff like that, you basically can just write a comment in your code saying, hey, I'd like this to do the Fibonacci sequence or whatever, and right beneath it, it gives you a code snippet, and you can just accept that. Well, that's great. I liked it because it did help me build code quicker. However, I was looking for something that kind of did, which I think is the holy grail of software development, we're not only just working within one file, but actually building an entire project, right? So that's where my hunt for different tools out there started. One of them is called GPT Engineer, which I'll dive into here in a second. There's another one called Code GPT. Let me find so this one here, Code GPT, basically is, they have, I believe, an extension as well. But what's cool about Code GPT is they have different contexts for different sorts of job roles. So you can see here they have like a coder. If I want to speak to a coder, I can click on this and start talking to it. If I want to speak to a web designer, maybe an HTML expert, they basically have built different APIs for different roles, which is cool. So if you wanted to talk to they have a data analyst, so if you wanted to talk to it about particular data questions, you can just click on here. But it's very much like ChatGPT, right? It's just a context, you ask it a question, it gives you back stuff. Not quite what I was looking for, right? I want something that I can run the whole gamut. And then the other tool that I ran into is called Cursor. So both Cursor and Code GPT are cool because you can get started pretty quickly. It's free. So obviously they probably have some usage limits or whatnot, but Cursor is one you guys can take a look at and does the same sort of thing, right? You have, in fact, I've got it up and running here. It pulls in VS Code or whatever IDE you're using. Essentially on the right-hand side here, you have a very ChatGPT-esque sort of format where you give it a prompt and then it will basically give you all of the instructions you need to build your project. So there's probably a way to have it run all of this, but I didn't immediately find that, so I just decided, you know what, let me try that with GPT Engineer. But the one thing that I was hoping this would do is right here where you see a command that I could click play and it would go do it. Well, didn't quite work. I'm probably missing something. But GPT Engineer, it took some working with, but I got it to do what I want. So for example, I'm going to show you how to set up GPT Engineer. So you go to their GitHub. They do have a more, I would say, paid product as well. That's you have to sign up on a waiting list. It takes forever, blah, blah, blah. But you can get started now. If you have a subscription to ChatGPT right now, you can create an API key, okay? So with that API key, you take that ChatGPT API key and plug it here into GPT Engineer. So GPT Engineer is still using ChatGPT underneath the hood, and I'll show you here in a second how that works. But you can get started pretty quickly by just running this Python pip install GPT Engineer. That will install a command on your machine called GPTE. So for example, let's go ahead and let's create something with GPT Engineer. So I'm going to open up my terminal here. I'll zoom in a bit so we're not completely blind. Right? And can I have a volunteer real quick? Okay. So give me a prompt. And what I mean by prompt, try to keep it simple here, but what do you want to build? Oop.
I want to build a desktop application that will pop up randomly every hour and ask me if I have pushed my code today yet.
Okay, so we're going to build a desktop application. It's going to pop up every hour, and it's going to say, "Have you pushed your code?"
Right.
Okay, so let's do that. So.
Hey, you pushed your code yet? I'd be like, oh gosh.
So I created a directory. This .env file in here has my ChatGPT API key. For sake of security, I'm not going to show it, but essentially you can go to GPT Engineer. It'll tell you how to create this file here. But I copied that over, and now I have an empty directory called desktop with that .env that has my ChatGPT thing. I'm going to create a file called prompt in here. And this prompt is basically going to reiterate what we're trying to request here. So prompt, and then I'm going to say, build a desktop application in Mac OS that pops up every hour and asks me, did you push your code yet? Okay, so I created the prompt, I have it in here, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run GPT. I'm going to say what path that the prompt is in. It's in our current directory here. And I'm going to hit go. And what this is doing is it's taking my prompt here, it's going up to ChatGPT, and it's basically saying what we just iterated, and now it's generating the code here. Now, one thing, this is telling you what it's going to do. It hasn't done it yet. So at the end of this, it's going to ask, do you want to execute this? We're going to say yes. Now virus is on my computer. No, I'm joking. So here's the thing. GPT Engineer is cool, but it's not perfect. What I've found has been the successful strategy for me is starting very simple, and then you can do GPT-I, which means improve my current code. So if you have an existing project, you can pass -I. Yes, question.
So you said improve my current code. Could you play off of the app that was created, requested to create a hash value of like a SHA-512 every minute?
Yeah, so you just edit the prompt file that I was showing there, and then you just say what new additions you want to your code. And then you just run, GPT-I. It will look at the new prompt and then go through this. So it looks like it's asking me if I want notifications. So I'm going to click allow notifications. And now every hour, I suppose, this will pop up. I don't know. Now, here's the deal. So now we can actually open it up and see what it generated. We have just 2 minutes, so I'm going to have to keep it tight here. But
could you edit it for every minute so we can see it? Or every second?
I mean, you can. I mean, to your heart's content, right? So here's the desktop thing. Yes, I trust this.